Hey everyone, welcome to Nectar TV's podcast this week. This week we are talking about Nectar for collab and remote workers. Obviously that's a big thing right now in a COVID society. So we wanted to kind of dive into what are some of the challenges some companies are having, what's some of the feedback that we've received from a lot of people out in the field. And our guests today are our very own Mark Reith and Bill Bernabe. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, Steve.
Why don't you we start off with you guys telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'd be happy to start. I'm a solutions architect here at Nectar, mostly focused on Cisco, but we cross lots of different platforms and vendors. But before Nectar, and I've been here for a couple of years, I was at Cisco, and I think it was something around 12 or 13. I think, Bill, you might know how long I was at Cisco, but I was at Cisco. Started off in TAC troubleshooting environments, and then when Cisco introduced telepresence, I moved over to the telepresence team and did architectures and designs for Cisco video and voice and collaboration. So I was there for the Tamberg acquisition, WebEx acquisition, on the Cisco side. So kind of everything collaboration before moving over to Nectar.
Great.
Hey, I'm Bill Bernabe. Actually, have a very similar path to Mr. Reith over here. Also started at Cisco. I was there for about 12 or 13 years. Started off in TAC as well in collaboration. Also moved over to the enterprise video team. So got really deep into telepresence, and that was just before moving to Nectar.
Sounds great. So we just had a webinar about Nectar for Cisco Collab, kind of revolving around remote workers. So speaking of being remote, I know that you guys we've all been remote in this day and age. What's it been like for you guys where you're at?
It's kind of been business as usual for me personally. I think that I've been remote for over 10 years.
Yeah.
So even when I worked at Cisco, I've worked remotely. So not much has changed in terms of workflow. I think it's, now, kids are at home a little bit more. But I was lucky to kind of set up my environment and know what it means to work from home a long time ago. So having a dedicated work space in the house and just being kind of used to it. So, not much has changed for me personally, but I know a lot of people are kind of struggling, dealing with working from home and families and maybe their brains being somewhere else, right? Because we're all kind of worried about personal situation, personal lives and things changing. So trying to get back focus into what we want to focus on in life.
Right, for sure.
I've been working primarily from home for probably the last 7 or 8 years. So much like Mark, I also have a very similar setup, so used to it as well. But I think the added challenge of having family home alongside that has certainly crept on me, pretty quickly. Just trying to balance work and family now when they're both so intertwined, instead of having the house to myself has probably been one of the larger challenges throughout the day.
Yeah, the same for me. I've got kind of a lot of kids, and so getting used to being at home all the time with the kids has been kind of I think the biggest challenge, right? You're in the middle of a conference call and they walk in and start talking to you, or they're just playing in the background and they're kind of loud.
I think that's
a lot less
great.
boring.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I think that before everyone was worried about kids in the background making noise or running by or whatnot, and I see it on customer calls, right? Where I'll hear I'm trying to be professional in front of a customer, and I hear their kids in the background, and I think it just brings more of a human aspect to the video collaboration because that wasn't there before, right? So now everyone's kind of just getting comfortable with people working from home, so it's really transformed like the expectation in a work environment. What is work? And so I think that's kind of fun. I kind of like that balance between I'm a person, I have a family and all this, and so I like hearing the background noises.
Yeah. It's really starting to normalize the work from home environment, right, and what to expect, which I really like.
Yeah, for sure. I know that kind of one of the changes that I've seen is, I have a lot of obviously friends that live around us and stuff, and they're in a lot of different industries, so healthcare, teachers, etc. And I know for us, I've worked from home as long as you guys have, and I've mentioned this on a couple of the other podcasts, but we were really used to being audio only. We've just kind of done that forever. Video's not really been one of the biggest pieces of that. Now I know you guys coming from Cisco, internally at Cisco, you guys made use of video quite a bit, but for a lot of people who've worked from home, there hasn't been a lot of video, but the teachers coming in, especially some of our friends who are in the healthcare industry, they started on video. And it's weird for them to go the other way and not have the camera on. And I've seen some reports come out of some of some of the monitoring applications, and you watch March happen, right? And it just kind of the takeoff from everybody going from home, hitting the expressways and a lot of the edge servers, coming in. But it wasn't. The most astounding thing was the video portion that just went from next to super low to just crazy high. So not only do you have the burden of more people on the edge, but that video layering on top of that, the bandwidth requirements that video's been. Have you guys seen a lot of the same things? More people utilizing video?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually it's a good thing, because I think for a lot of us that did like audio conferencing for a really, really long time and then jumped over to video, that's almost a harder transition, because you'll be on an audio conference, right? And there's no eye contact. So
Yeah.
you're gazing around, you're looking around the room, you're maybe doing something else, right? And all of a sudden you get thrown into a video world, and now it's like you're not used to the eye contact. You're kind of like you can't focus, and you know,
Right.
right? And so if you went from in person, talking to video, I think that's a decent jump, because you still got to like focus and be present in the conversation. You get engaged in the conversation, versus audio conferencing was totally like this weird thing where there was no engagement, right? You just kind of were walking around, or you're doing your own thing, and on mute. And so I think it's almost better to jump right into video, from just like a personal, like a connection perspective.
Yeah, I have to shave more.
Well, beards are so trendy now. Maybe you don't have to.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Yeah, you have a coffee and a beard.
Yeah, I know you guys came from Cisco, and you guys really focus in on our Cisco collab environment. And you guys have obviously talked with a lot of customers and heard a lot of experiences around Cisco. But going into it, there's multiple types of collab. You've got on-prem collab, you've got cloud collab. And then you've got people interfacing in collab in several different aspects. You'll have soft clients, you've got hard phones, you've got video desktop units, and etc. So before COVID started, what was some of the hot topics or things that people were having challenges with before this even took place?
I think one of the bigger ones is probably migration to the cloud, right? That's been such a great push from the Cisco side and from Microsoft and other vendors. Was how do we get the cloud? How do we do it safely? How do we do it seamlessly without impacting users? What does that transition look like? And what kind of hardware, software do we need to actually have that in our environment? And I think obviously the work from home workforce that we have now, it definitely plays a lot into that, because let's say it certainly accelerated that move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the technology was always moving towards kind of enabling collaboration. So, before COVID, we were seeing huddle spaces were really popular, and kind of the open workspace environment within the enterprise was gaining a lot of popularity. And as Bill said, moving to the cloud, but everything was kind of this slow progression, right? Slowly adding huddle spaces, slowly adding the open workspaces, and migration to the cloud. And what's happening now, we kind of just accelerated everything 100-fold. So it's basically kind of the same path, just a huge acceleration. And I think now more of a focus on agility, right? So I think flexibility is here to stay. Mm-hmm. So now there's this concept of workplace agility and flexibility and flexible work hours and different workflows, synchronous and asynchronous workflows. So I just say more of an extreme acceleration, and now we're trying to put the pieces together after that acceleration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So things were moving to the cloud, but now we're having to move all of a sudden faster before we planned on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then how do you deal with that, right? So now you have all these disjointed maybe platforms or disjointed tools that you threw into place in order to keep people working and keep customers and employees happy. And now you have all these tools and all these different ways of collaboration. You maybe need to consolidate that or get better visibility across the board. So dealing with that is kind of what we're seeing now.
Yeah. So speaking of that, now that this has all taken place, those are some of the, you're kind of starting to go down the next path of really what are these guys facing now? What are some of the biggest problems they've run into? And I want to say post-COVID, but I think that a lot of companies are going to, and you hear it in the news, continue this work from home. So I think this remote work mentality, the edge, and the cloud are going to play a far more important. I mean, it was an important role before, but I think that that's elevated a little more than it even was to begin with, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you think that's going to look like, going forward?
Ooh, man. So again, agility, flexibility, obviously a lot more focus on just well-being and work-life balance is going to be really important. So just health in general, right? Health of your employees is kind of was top of mind for a while, and I think that'll continue. But just you know, understanding, keeping customer service levels high, customer sat and employee sat high, I think is important because during COVID, I think it could have been a struggle to maintain, customer satisfaction because the tools weren't in place. So
Mhm.
continuing the need for greater IT support around customer satisfaction, employee well-being, work-life balance, and flexibility.
What are you hearing some of the challenges from an end user? Like what's their experience? What are some of the things that they really kind of get frustrated with?
I think
Bill, yeah, go
from an
ahead,
IT
Bill.
support perspective, right? If you think about the typical end user now, right, they're basically just thrown into a home environment. They don't have setups like Mark and I may have had. We had the luxury to be able to work from home beforehand. We were prepped for it. We've done it for years and years on end. But I think just having a setup, having a place where you can actually sit down and do work and not be bothered. Also having a setup that is supportable. If you think about what people have at home, maybe their home laptops, their phones, their tablets, they're no longer on their corporate network, so they're on Wi-Fi. It makes an IT support nightmare. So maybe
Yeah.
they're not getting the same level of support from IT that they had before. So I think there's a lot of things, right? One is what does your new work footprint look like, but two is
Hmm.
how do you actually support that going forward? And I don't think there's a lot of good answers quite yet for that.
Yeah.
And the family at home is challenging, right? Like I remember doing a lot of video and UC designs, right? And you had to explain to customers what is quality of service, what is a DSCP marking, and what does it mean for different applications to compete. And that has a whole new meaning when you have a family at home, right? Where you have kids streaming Netflix and Pandora, and
Yeah.
a spouse that's working from home, and now you have all this competing traffic at home. You have to understand, how does that work together? What does that mean when you have an internet connection? And work from home itself is kind of misleading in a way because it's really remote work and work from anywhere. And so we see a lot of people, working from Starbucks or working from, I don't know, the golf club or wherever it may be, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you don't necessarily have the consistency that you had within the enterprise environment. So you have to support all these different models and being able to work from anywhere, really. And so that's really the challenge is, you know, what does that mean, and how do you still enable collaboration, how do you still enable efficiency in all these different crazy complex environments all over the place?
Right.
Yeah, I've noticed like my wife's a teacher, and so she'll go and get on some of these conference sessions, and every single person on there has challenges with, they're trying to use the mic and speakers in their laptop, so they're, I mean, somebody can't find the mute button, right? It's one of those things where you talk about home networks, for example. One of the things I've always had a challenge with is a lot of your home networks. The providers will give you their routers, and we all know that the Wi-Fi that's built into the provider routers was never meant to handle the number of devices that people have on Wi-Fi today. I mean, my exercise equipment and my garage door openers are on Wi-Fi, right? I probably have
Uh-huh.
100 devices in my house hanging off
Right.
Wi-Fi, and it really melts it down, and you have these just little ancillary troubleshooting problems.
Yeah, or people, walking around their house. So I have my Bluetooth headset on, and if I wasn't on video and I wanted to go refill my coffee, I'm going to walk away from my computer for a little bit while on a
Right?
call, right? And so that's going to affect the experience. So you have so many different, more variables now going into what user experience is. And
Yeah.
it was really funny how you pointed out like people learning video, right, or learning conferencing for the first time, because
Yeah.
I totally saw that at my house where people don't understand like the etiquette, right? I think there's like this
Yeah.
etiquette that you learn over time, like how to mute yourself or don't do this on camera, or
Right.
and people are going through that learning process now where you get all this background noise, and no one knows how to mute or unmute. And it's so funny, even like me as an experienced video user, like I still have problems finding the mute button when someone asks me, "Hey Mark, what do you think?" I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, sorry, I was talking to mute still."
Right.
And so it's like, I don't know if that's ever going to go away, right?
Or the inevitable double mute where the headset's muted
Right.
and the software's muted, right?
Yeah, so we have all those problems. So just we're compounding problems, right? When you're in this environment that's not as controlled as the enterprise network was previously.
Right. So obviously, we don't want to leave today without talking a little bit about Nectar, right? So we are a monitoring application for these environments, and we in the webinar we asked a few questions and had some polls come back, and one of the ones was, what's the largest visibility gap for your collaboration environment? And number one, kind of based on what we're just talking about, was the desktop and the client. Why do you think that's such a big gap for people?
I think it goes back to one of the points that I made a few minutes ago, is that it may be an unknown device, right? If you look at where people are working, maybe they're downstairs, like Mark said, in their kitchen, getting a cup of coffee on their cell phone or on their tablet,
Yeah.
on a home device, on home Wi-Fi, on a home internet connection. There's all these new variables for IT to not necessarily track, they have to deal with them, right? When it comes down to collaboration, it's real time and it has to work and work almost flawlessly.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely the biggest gap that I've seen as well, is as users were thrust into that new world, how do you control and manage that new world?
Yeah, everything desktop related is absolutely a new thing, because when you look back over the last 20 years, the devices like your phones and your telepresence units and all of those types of things that are connected to the network, they have a lot of management and feedback of data, tons of it. And if you're trying to find out what's going on, these types of endpoints were designed with that in mind. And all of a sudden, when you've moved everything to the desktop, the software applications and headsets and stuff are, you can feel the industry desperately trying to catch up with the feedback that those things provide. And we're starting to see some of that. I mean, I guess guys can kind of talk for an example about some of the data that maybe we get from the Plantronics headsets, or the fact that Jabber and those clients will feed back data, especially for some of the video calls for CMS.
Yeah, but it's about piecing that all together. I think is kind of what you're alluding to, is that you have all this data from Bluetooth signal strength to Wi-Fi in the house quality, to what other applications are running on your desktop, to what type of device is it, what's the CPU memory of the device. So all these things are a factor, and you don't want to go to a bunch of different places for each vendor and try to piece that together on your own. For each issue that comes up. So, how do you create a tool, or how do you have a tool that takes all that information and creates kind of one contextual narrative for what that user experience is based on all those devices and all the environmental factors? So I think just layers of context, putting things together, kind of more of the analytics or intelligence behind all of that is going to be really, really important moving forward. Because, I mean, like I mentioned, flexibility is kind of here to stay. So with flexibility kind of comes a lot of variables and unknowns. You're really going to have to piece all that together and come up with something meaningful from all that data that you can actually leverage and that's actionable.
Mm-hmm. One of the other poll questions is, how important is live monitoring of collab endpoints? And it was pretty interesting to see that 83% responded as very important. Talk a little bit about that. Why do you guys think that was the feedback there for live monitoring?
Think about where people are sitting now, right? If you are at home, you're no longer sitting in the conference room, in the boardroom. There's, maybe you sat down in the office for a 2 or 3 hour meeting, right? Those are very typical. And now there's all happening from home. So you don't want to be 20 or 30 minutes into a meeting and have the quality, that call quality go to crap. You want to be able to troubleshoot it in real time, correct it before the meeting ends, and make sure it's successful.
Right.
Yeah, totally. I mean, time is money, right? So the faster you can be alerted that there's an issue, and the faster you can resolve it, the more it's going to be impactful for whatever you're trying to fix. The less it's going to cost you as a business, less productivity lost, etc.
Okay, so we'll kind of wrap with what your guys' take on how Nectar itself is going to be able to, our product line and how we'll benefit Cisco Collab environments?
Well, I think we're well positioned. So we do have, there's a ton of data sources, right? Whether it's coming from your headset, from the client side itself, from the desktop, and we have solutions that meet all those needs. And also where some vendors like Cisco may not provide real-time stats, we have tools and a software suite that's ready to go to actually get those real-time stats from audio and video calls. So where data does not exist from the vendor, we can certainly help to create it and to find it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Nectar is really focused on experience, right? So we're looking at user experience, and that's a great way to look at things. So, single pane of glass is kind of what we always say, where you're taking all of this disjointed data, putting it together to create context, and what is the user experience for that? How do you measure that? So, as people are working from home and working from all these different devices, how do you piece all that together and come up with, one view, one persona for what that experience is, or what that experience is across the enterprise environment and all your users. So definitely a good position to kind of take data from all over the place and put it together in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
And do analytics on it, right? So, you want visibility, you want insight into all these kind of disparate environments. So that type of insight is very, very meaningful and very, very useful.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I hope you stay safe during this whole time. It's probably going to wrap us up for the day, but I want to thank you guys for joining the podcast today. And if you're watching the podcast, please go to our website. We have more webinars coming up around several topics around Collab. And is there anything you guys want to leave us with?
No, I agree. I said to certainly echo everyone staying safe. Obviously, that's top of mind, personally within the enterprise environment. And so, yeah, absolutely continue to stay safe, be healthy. And I think that we're in for some good changes, positive changes, right, from this.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I will catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks.
All right.